Before there were temples raised to her name, before poets tried to capture her with careful words, before sculptors chased her likeness in marble, there was only the sea and a hush that followed great upheaval. The world was still young, bruised by the struggles of older powers, and the waves carried memories older than the sky. It was from this restless water that Aphrodite first arrived, not as a child who needed time to grow, but as a presence already complete, already radiant, already aware of the effect she would have on everything that could see, feel, or desire. The sea did not simply part for her. It seemed to recognize her. Foam gathered as if summoned by an unspoken command, curling and brightening until it became something more than water. From that shimmering cradle she rose, balanced and unafraid. Her first breath carried on a warm breeze that did not exist moments before. Wherever her feet might have touched the waves, the water calmed. Wherever her gaze drifted, the horizon softened. Beauty, until that moment, had been scattered and uncertain. With her arrival, it became focused. Some stories say she drifted toward the island of Cythera first, others that the winds carried her to Cyprus. The truth mattered less than the result. Wherever Aphrodite came ashore, the land responded. Grass lifted its head. Flowers leaned toward her. Stones warmed. She did not command this response. She inspired it. Love, in its earliest form, was not yet romance or longing or heartbreak. It was attraction, the quiet pull that makes one thing move closer to another without knowing why. Aphrodite embodied that pull. She did not arrive alone for long. The moment her presence settled into the world, other forces began to gather around her, drawn like moths to a flame that promised warmth instead of destruction. The first to answer her unspoken call was Eros, the winged force of desire. Some called him her son, others her companion, others something older who simply recognized her as a kindred power. Where Aphrodite shaped attraction, Eros sharpened it. His arrows did not create love from nothing. They awakened what already slept in the heart. Behind him came the Charites, later known as the Graces. They moved with laughter and lightness, their steps turning the air itself into something playful. Where Aphrodite stood, they danced. Where she smiled, they adorned her, weaving her hair, arranging her garments, reminding the world that beauty was not static. It moved, it changed, it shimmered differently depending on the light in the moment and the eye that beheld it. Then came Pytho, the spirit of persuasion, whose voice could soften resistance without force. Pytho understood that love was not only physical pull, but the gentle bending of will, the moment when one chooses to say yes rather than no. With Pytho at her side, Aphrodite did not need threats or commands. Words became invitations, glances became promises, silence became meaningful. Together, this growing entourage formed something new on Olympus and beyond. Other gods ruled domains that were clear and bounded. The sea obeyed tides, the sky followed storms, the harvest rose and fell with seasons. But love crossed every boundary. Aphrodite's influence slipped into every realm without asking permission. It stirred gods and mortals alike, often catching them unprepared. When Aphrodite finally stepped among the Olympians, her presence unsettled them. Not because she sought power in the way Zeus did, or wisdom like Athena, or order like Hera. She unsettled them because she revealed what they already felt but preferred to ignore. Even the most disciplined god found their thoughts wandering when she passed. Even the most proud felt the faint, dangerous wish to be admired by her. Hera watched her carefully. Marriage and devotion were Hera's domain, and Aphrodite represented the spark that often disrupted both. Athena, sharp-eyed and analytical, regarded her with a mix of curiosity and suspicion, recognizing a force that could undo strategy with a single smile. Artemis, sworn to her own path, kept her distance, sensing that Aphrodite's gifts were not meant for everyone. Zeus understood her power immediately, and that understanding came with concern. Desire among the gods was not a small thing. Rivalries already existed. Aphrodite threatened to turn them into open conflict. Every god wanted her favor. Every god imagined himself reflected in her gaze. Love, when uncontrolled, could fracture even Olympus. Yet Aphrodite herself did not plot or scheme. She explored. She listened. She learned the rhythms of her own influence. Among mortals, she walked unseen through marketplaces and along shores, watching how hearts responded to one another. She noticed how longing could inspire courage in one person and cruelty in another. She learned that love was never harmless, but neither was it evil. It was a force, and like all forces, it revealed character rather than creating it. Her laughter became famous, light and unburdened, echoing wherever attraction sparked unexpectedly. But she was not shallow, as later voices would sometimes claim. Aphrodite understood loss as well as joy. She watched lovers part. She saw promises break. She felt the sting when desire faded or turned cold. Love's fragility was as much her domain as its intensity. As her influence spread, so did her symbols. The dove followed her without being taught, gentle and devoted. The swan mirrored her grace. Roses bloomed where she lingered too long, their beauty inseparable from their thorns. The sea itself remained tied to her identity, reminding the world that love, like water, could soothe or drown depending on its depth. This was Aphrodite at the beginning of her story, not yet entangled in the famous dramas that would later define her in mortal memory. She was not yet a wife, not yet a lover in scandal, not yet a cause of war or humiliation. She was a presence newly arrived, learning the contours of a world that would never again be untouched by desire. In time, the gods would try to contain her. They would attempt to bind love with rules, contracts, and expectations. They would place her in roles she did not choose, hoping to make her predictable. But in these early days, Aphrodite was still free, still discovering herself, still walking the thin line between harmony and chaos that love always traces. And even then, the world leaned toward her, unaware that every story of longing, devotion, jealousy, and heartbreak yet to come would carry her quiet signature, written not in words, but in the human heart itself. Aphrodite's presence on Olympus did not settle into stillness. It stirred, shifted, and invited movement wherever it lingered. The gods quickly learned that love, once awakened, refused to remain quiet. Desire did not announce itself with thunder or prophecy. It arrived as a distraction, a lingering thought, a warmth that made even immortals restless. As Aphrodite took her place among them, her entourage grew more defined. Eros rarely left her side now, his wings flickering with impatience, his gaze sharp with curiosity. He delighted in watching how even the most powerful gods struggled to hide their reactions. A glance here, a blush there, a sudden rivalry sparked over nothing more than who stood closer to her. Eros did not invent these reactions. He simply nudged them awake, like embers stirred into flame. The Charites continued to orbit her like living light. Where Aphrodite moved, they softened the space around her, smoothing tension into laughter, turning severity into ease. They were not fools or ornaments. They understood their role. Beauty, when paired with warmth, became irresistible. Beauty alone could intimidate. Together they disarmed. Pytho's influence grew stronger as well. Words spoken near Aphrodite seemed to land differently. Promises felt heavier. Apologies sounded more sincere. Persuasion did not feel like surrender. It felt like agreement discovered rather than forced. Mortals later would mistake this power for manipulation, but in these early days it was simply connection, the alignment of desire between two willing hearts. Yet Olympus was not built to accommodate such a force without consequence. Hera watched Aphrodite with careful restraint. She saw how easily desire could unravel vows, how attraction could loosen the bonds she worked tirelessly to protect. Hera did not hate Aphrodite, not at first. She feared her. Love, uncontrolled, threatened the stability of marriage and order alike. Athena, ever observant, tried to understand Aphrodite's power through logic. She studied patterns, watching who fell under her influence and who resisted. She noticed that discipline could delay desire, but never erase it. Even those who prided themselves on reason were not immune forever. This unsettled Athena more than she cared to admit. Ares, on the other hand, felt Aphrodite before he fully understood her. War and love were older companions than mortals realized. Where conflict flared, desire often followed. Ares found himself drawn to her laughter, to the way she moved without fear among beings who measured worth through strength. She did not flinch at violence, nor did she glorify it. She simply saw it as another expression of passion, unrestrained. Apollo admired her openly, struck by how her presence mirrored music itself, harmony and tension woven together. Hermes, quick and clever, enjoyed her company for the games of wit and flirtation it inspired. Even Poseidon felt the pull, recognizing in her the same restless depth that lived within the sea. Zeus watched all of this unfold with growing concern. Olympus was already a place of fragile balance. Love threatened to tip it into chaos. Rivalries sharpened, alliances shifted. Desire, unlike ambition, did not follow hierarchy. Aphrodite could not be commanded, and that made her dangerous. It was Zeus who first spoke the thought others had not dared voice. Aphrodite needed to be anchored. Love needed boundaries, a place to rest so it would not roam unchecked. The solution he proposed was not cruel by divine standards. It was practical. Marriage. The choice of husband was deliberate. Hephaestus, the master of craft and fire, was brilliant, patient, and already accustomed to standing apart from the effortless beauty of Olympus. He understood creation, shaping raw material into something lasting. Zeus believed that union would temper Aphrodite's influence, grounding her in loyalty and routine. Aphrodite did not protest loudly. She listened, as she always did. She understood the fear beneath the decision. She understood that love unsettled those who depended on control. Still, acceptance did not mean surrender of self. When she became Hephaestus's wife, she did not cease to be Aphrodite. Hephaestus himself approached the union with cautious hope. He admired her deeply, not only for her beauty, but for the way the world responded to her. He believed, perhaps naively, that devotion and craftsmanship could earn affection over time. He poured that hope into his work, forging gifts worthy of a goddess whose presence already shaped the world. Among these creations was a belt, subtle yet powerful, woven with symbols of attraction and grace. It did not create Aphrodite's beauty. It reflected it, amplifying what was already there. When she wore it, desire sharpened, attention lingered, and hearts leaned forward without knowing why. The belt became a symbol not of deception, but of love's undeniable pull. Despite the marriage, Aphrodite remained what she had always been, a force that could not be contained by contracts. Love did not belong to one person, not even a goddess. It flowed outward, touching gods and mortals alike. And where it touched, stories began to form. Mortals felt her influence most intensely. She walked among them unseen, watching how longing shaped their lives. She noticed how love could inspire songs, drive journeys, start feuds, and heal grief. She did not favor only the beautiful or the powerful. Love, she learned, was democratic in its reach, but selective in its cruelty. She watched young lovers swear eternity with trembling voices. She watched older hearts awaken unexpectedly. She watched desire clash with duty, often leaving wreckage behind. These moments did not harden her. They deepened her understanding. Love was never simple, but it was always honest in its effect. As her reputation spread, so did her worship. Small shrines appeared near coastlines, gardens, and crossroads. Offerings were left quietly, not demanded by law or fear, but by hope. People asked not for conquest or victory, but for connection. To be seen, to be wanted, to be chosen. Aphrodite listened to these prayers without judgment. She did not answer all of them, and she never promised fairness. Love was not a reward. It was an experience, and experiences could wound as easily as they could uplift. Among the gods, tension continued to grow. Marriage had not dulled her influence. If anything, it had revealed how fragile control truly was. Desire still slipped through cracks in divine order. And Aphrodite, aware of every tremor she caused, neither apologized nor reveled in it. She simply existed as she always had, luminous and complex, carrying within her the truth the gods would spend eternity trying to deny. Love could not be ruled. It could only be lived. And Aphrodite was only just beginning to show the world what that truly meant. Aphrodite's marriage did not quiet the currents she carried. If anything, it clarified them. Bound by law but not by nature, she moved through Olympus with the same effortless gravity as before, and the gods slowly realized that love did not diminish when given a name or a vow. It simply changed shape. Hephaestus worked endlessly. His forge burned day and night, not out of jealousy alone, but out of belief. He believed that constancy could rival desire, that patience could build something lasting where passion flickered. Every strike of his hammer carried intention. Every gift he crafted for Aphrodite was an attempt to speak in the only language he trusted: creation. Aphrodite accepted these gifts with grace. She never mocked him. She never dismissed his devotion. She wore his work proudly, understanding the care behind it. Yet affection was not something she could manufacture in return. Love, she knew better than anyone, could not be forced into existence through effort alone. Elsewhere on Olympus, Ares burned. The god of war had always known hunger. But this was different. This was not the thrill of battle or the rush of victory. This was longing. Raw, restless, and undisciplined. Where Hephaestus admired Aphrodite from a place of hope, Ares felt her from instinct. She represented everything that made conflict meaningful: desire, risk, surrender. Their connection did not begin with planning. It began with recognition. A shared glance held too long. A pause in conversation where words were no longer necessary. Aphrodite saw in Ares the truth of passion unfiltered, the way desire could overwhelm reason entirely. Ares saw in her the calm at the center of intensity, the beauty that made destruction feel purposeful. When they came together, it was not subtle. Love and war collided, and the result was fierce, consuming, and impossible to hide forever. Yet even in secrecy, their union shaped the world. From them came forces that embodied both harmony and conflict. Phobos and Deimos, fear and terror, followed Ares into battle, reminders that love could give birth to dread as easily as joy. Harmonia, their daughter, carried balance instead, a living contradiction that proved even the wildest passion could produce order. Aphrodite did not deny these children. She embraced every aspect of what she inspired, even when it frightened others. Love, she understood, was not gentle by default. It could create unity or chaos, depending on how it was held. Hephaestus eventually learned the truth, not through rumor but through sight. The sun had watched. Helios saw everything, and light reveals what darkness tries to protect. When the revelation came, it cut deep, not because of wounded pride, but because hope had been sincere. Hephaestus did not rage, he planned. His response was precise, crafted with the same care he gave his finest works. He forged a net so delicate it seemed invisible, yet strong enough to hold even gods. When it fell, it revealed more than infidelity. It exposed how easily desire embarrassed power. The laughter of the gods echoed across Olympus, not out of cruelty alone, but relief. Love had humbled even the mighty. Aphrodite endured the moment with dignity. Shame slid off her like water. Love was not a crime to her. It was a force, and forces left marks. Ares laughed too, defiant even in exposure. Hephaestus stood apart, his silence louder than accusation. Afterward, Aphrodite withdrew for a time, not in defeat, but in reflection. She returned to the places that first welcomed her, to Cyprus, to the edge of the sea. There, among mortals, her influence continued uninterrupted. It was among humans that her power revealed its sharpest edges. She watched cities rise and fall over love, watched friendships fracture, alliances crumble, and wars ignite not for land or gold, but for desire denied or claimed. Mortals did not possess the detachment of gods. Love consumed them fully, and Aphrodite felt both pride and sorrow in that intensity. She guided lovers gently when she could. She inspired devotion, reconciliation, and tenderness. But she did not intervene to erase pain entirely. Without risk, love lost its meaning. Without vulnerability, it became hollow. Some mortals cursed her name when longing turned to loss. Others praised her when love transformed their lives. Aphrodite accepted both reactions as truth. She was not a goddess of comfort. She was a goddess of connection. Back on Olympus, attitudes shifted. Hera grew more guarded, Athena more contemplative, Zeus more cautious. They had all witnessed how love could disrupt order without ever raising a weapon. Aphrodite returned eventually, unchanged in essence but deeper in understanding. She no longer pretended love could be contained, but she also no longer pretended it was innocent. It shaped destiny as surely as fate itself. Wherever she walked, stories followed. Not because she sought them, but because love demanded expression. Songs, prayers, regrets, and legends gathered around her like echoes. And still, her journey was far from complete, because love does not end with scandal or reconciliation. It continues, reshaping itself with every heart it touches. And Aphrodite, eternal and luminous, remained at its center, not as a ruler, but as its living truth. Time passed differently for Aphrodite than it did for mortals. Years meant little to an immortal, yet experiences still layered themselves upon her, shaping how she understood the force she embodied. Love did not grow tired, but it did grow complicated. By now, her name carried weight across the world, not whispered only in private longing, but spoken aloud in courts, in temples, and before great decisions. Kings consulted her favor before marriages meant to seal alliances. Queens prayed to her for devotion that would outlast youth. Sailors carved her symbols into the prows of ships, hoping desire might guide them safely home rather than pull them toward ruin. Aphrodite listened to all of it. She noticed how love had begun to wear disguises. What once was raw attraction now came wrapped in expectation, obligation, and fear. Mortals asked not just to love, but to be loved in return, to possess without losing, to bind another heart without being bound themselves. These requests revealed a truth even the gods struggled to accept. Love was never symmetrical. This imbalance became most visible in the stories that formed around her influence. Lovers were rarely equal in longing. One burned hotter. One hesitated longer. One sacrificed more. Aphrodite did not see this as cruelty. She saw it as honesty. Desire revealed priority, and priority revealed character. Among the gods, her relationship shifted again. Ares still returned to her, drawn back after every conflict as if battle sharpened his need for her presence. Their connection never softened, but it matured. Less reckless, more knowing. They understood now that passion without reflection left scars, even on immortals. Hephaestus withdrew further into his craft. He no longer forged gifts to win Aphrodite's affection. Instead, he poured himself into invention for its own sake. In this, Aphrodite saw a quiet evolution. Love lost does not always turn bitter. Sometimes it transforms into mastery. She respected him more for this than she ever had for his devotion. Hera's stance toward Aphrodite changed as well. The queen of the gods came to recognize that love was not her enemy, but her test. Marriage without desire became hollow. Desire without commitment became chaos. Between these extremes lay a fragile balance, one neither goddess fully controlled. Their rivalry softened into wary coexistence, a recognition that their domains overlapped more than either liked to admit. Athena continued to study Aphrodite from a distance, but now with humility. Strategy could account for ambition, fear, and loyalty. It could not fully predict love. This unsettled Athena, yet it also intrigued her. She began to see Aphrodite not as disorder, but as the variable that made every plan human, even among gods. Aphrodite herself turned her attention increasingly toward mortals whose lives mirrored this complexity. She watched lovers choose duty over desire and desire over safety. She saw marriages endure without warmth and affairs burn brightly before collapsing. She saw love inspire art that outlived its creator, and hatred disguised as devotion that destroyed entire families. She did not intervene in every tragedy. To do so would unravel the very essence of love's meaning. Pain was not a flaw in love. It was evidence that something real had been risked. Yet there were moments when Aphrodite did act decisively. When arrogance masqueraded as devotion, she humbled it. When cruelty hid behind claims of passion, she exposed it. Love was not an excuse for harm. It was a mirror, and not everyone liked what they saw reflected there. As these stories multiplied, Aphrodite's image evolved. She was no longer seen only as a bringer of pleasure. She became a figure of consequence. To love deeply was to invite transformation, for better or worse. To call upon her was to accept that desire might change everything. Even the gods grew more cautious around her. They learned that attraction carried responsibility, that longing was not harmless. Zeus himself, master of thunder and law, found that love could disrupt even his authority in ways force never could. He no longer sought to contain Aphrodite. He endured her. And Aphrodite, wiser now, carried herself with quiet confidence. She did not need to prove her power. The world itself bore witness. Love had shaped empires, shattered heroes, and inspired legends. It had created life and destroyed certainty. It had humbled gods and elevated mortals. This was her realm. Not sweetness alone, not beauty without cost, but connection in its truest form, where hearts reached outward, knowing they might be broken, and chose to do so anyway. And still, love continued to evolve. And Aphrodite continued with it, eternal not because she was perfect, but because desire itself could never be extinguished. One final chapter remained, not of endings, but of legacy. Aphrodite's story did not end with temples or tales, nor with scandal or reverence. It settled instead into something quieter and far more enduring. Love, once unleashed into the world, no longer needed her constant presence to continue its work. It moved on its own now, passed from heart to heart like a living inheritance. From Olympus, she watched generations rise and fall. Mortals changed their languages, their cities, their laws. But their longings remained familiar. They still reached for one another with the same hope and fear. They still confused possession with devotion, passion with permanence. And they still turned to her name when desire became too heavy to carry alone. Aphrodite no longer walked among them as she once had. She did not need to. Her influence was woven into the world's fabric. Every glance held too long, every promise whispered in the dark, every ache that lingered after goodbye carried her presence. Love had become self-sustaining. Among the gods, her role softened into inevitability. No longer feared as a disruptor, no longer challenged as a rival, she became something older and quieter, a truth no power could erase. Even those who denied her influence betrayed themselves through longing. Even those who claimed indifference found their choices shaped by desire they could not name. Ares returned to her less often now, their bond transformed by time. The fire between them never died, but it no longer demanded constant fuel. It existed as memory and understanding, proof that passion did not vanish simply because it changed form. Harmonia grew into her own quiet strength, a reminder that balance could be born from chaos without erasing it. Hephaestus, too, found peace. His creations outlived resentment. His legacy became innovation rather than heartbreak. Aphrodite did not regret the pain she had caused him, but she honored what he became beyond it. Love, she knew, did not always mean staying. Sometimes it meant allowing distance to shape something new. Hera ruled beside Zeus with steadier resolve, wiser now to love's unpredictability. Athena refined her strategies, accepting that no plan was complete without accounting for the human heart. Even Artemis, distant as ever, understood that choosing solitude was itself a relationship with desire, defined by refusal rather than absence. Aphrodite stood apart from all of them, not isolated, but centered. She no longer needed to be adored to exist. She no longer needed chaos to feel alive. Love had taught her what it taught everyone eventually. Intensity fades, but connection endures. When mortals later tried to reduce her to symbol alone, to beauty without depth or pleasure without consequence, they misunderstood her. Aphrodite was never about ease. She was about exposure. To love was to reveal oneself, to risk being known, to accept transformation without certainty of outcome. This was the lesson she left behind. Not that love always ends happily, or that desire guarantees fulfillment, but that a life untouched by love remains unfinished. Even loss testified to having felt something real. Even heartbreak marked a moment of truth. As centuries passed, her temples crumbled, her statues weathered, her stories shifted shape. Yet love did not disappear with them. It adapted. It survived. It waited. Aphrodite remained, not as a figure standing on a shore or throne, but as the quiet force that pulled two lives together against reason, habit, or fear. She lived in the courage to choose connection despite impermanence. And so her story closed not with an ending, but with continuation. Every time a heart opens knowing it may break, Aphrodite is there, not watching, not judging, simply present as she has always been, in the space where desire becomes meaning, and love, in all its flawed beauty, proves itself eternal.